Rachel Morrison sat in her car outside Harvest Moon Bistro, watching raindrops race down her windshield like the doubts racing through her mind. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had gone white. In the back seat, her 12-year-old son Ethan hummed softly, his fingers tracing invisible patterns on the fogged window. "Mom, your breathing is weird," Ethan observed, his voice carrying that matter-of-fact tone that always caught Rachel off guard. "You do that before important presentations at work." Rachel caught her son's eyes in the rearview mirror and felt her heart squeeze. Those green eyes, Marcus's eyes, looked back at her with an intelligence that had nothing to do with the autism diagnosis doctors had given him at age 3, or the wheelchair he'd been using since a diving accident 2 years ago had damaged his spine. "What if this is a mistake?" Rachel whispered. "Then we go home and order Thai food," Ethan said simply. "But Mom, you've been on 6 dates this year. 6 times you left me with Aunt Jenny. 6 times you came home with that sad face you think I don't notice." "I don't have a sad face." "You absolutely do. Your mouth smiles but your eyes don't. It's called a social smile. I learned about it in my psychology class online." Rachel turned in her seat to face her son fully. At 12, Ethan was tall for his age, his legs motionless beneath his favorite NASA hoodie. The accident had been Rachel's fault. She'd been the one who suggested the community pool that day, the one who'd been checking her phone when Ethan dove into the shallow end, the one who'd had to watch paramedics work on her child's limp body. "Ethan, listen to me carefully. What I'm about to do is probably going to seem strange. I'm bringing you inside with me to meet Daniel." Ethan's eyes widened. "On your date? An actual date?" "Yes, because I'm tired of pretending. Every man I've dated has said the right things about accepting you, but the moment things get serious, they start suggesting I find better care options or give you more independence. They see you as an obstacle to a relationship with me, not as part of who I am." "So this is a test," Ethan said, processing. "You're testing Daniel to see if he runs away. Is that cruel of me?" Ethan considered this with the seriousness he brought to all questions. "No, it's logical. If Daniel can't handle me on date 1, he definitely can't handle me on date 20. You're being efficient. I appreciate efficiency." Despite her nerves, Rachel smiled. "When did you become so wise?" "Probably around the same time I had to relearn how to use a bathroom," Ethan said with the dark humor he'd developed as a coping mechanism. "Trauma either breaks you or makes you philosophical. I chose philosophy." Rachel grabbed her umbrella and the portable ramp they kept in the trunk. Getting Ethan's wheelchair out was a choreographed routine they'd perfected through repetition. Unfold, lock, position, transfer. Ethan helped where he could, his upper body strength impressive from months of physical therapy. "Ready?" Rachel asked, holding the umbrella over both of them. "Ready. But Mom? If he's nice to you but weird about me, we leave immediately. I don't want you settling for someone who tolerates me. You deserve someone who actually likes me." "Deal." They made their way toward the restaurant entrance. Through the large windows, Rachel could see Daniel already seated, checking his watch. Daniel Park, 41 years old, architect, divorced, passionate about urban design, and apparently an excellent cook based on the food photos he'd shared. They'd met through a professional networking event. Rachel's company needed someone to redesign their headquarters, and Daniel's firm had been recommended. Their first conversation about zoning regulations had somehow turned into a 3-hour discussion about everything from Korean cuisine to climate change. When he'd asked her to dinner, Rachel had been surprised by how much she wanted to say yes. But wanting wasn't enough. Not anymore. The hostess greeted them with a practiced smile that flickered only slightly when she noticed Ethan's wheelchair. "Welcome to Harvest Moon. Do you have a reservation?" "Morrison, party of 2, Rachel said, then added firmly. "Actually, party of 3 now." The hostess's confusion was evident. "I'm sorry, the reservation was for." "I know what the reservation was for. We'll need a table with space for a wheelchair." As they followed the hostess through the restaurant, Rachel felt the familiar weight of stares. Some people looked away quickly, embarrassed to be caught looking. Others watched with pity or curiosity. A small child pointed until his mother shushed him. Ethan sat straighter in his chair, a gesture Rachel recognized. He was making himself visible, refusing to shrink from the attention. Pride swelled in her chest. Daniel looked up as they approached, and Rachel watched his face carefully, cataloging every micro-expression. Confusion first, understandable. Then his gaze dropped to Ethan, and Rachel's stomach clenched, preparing for the disappointment she'd learned to expect. But Daniel did something unexpected. He stood up immediately and walked past Rachel directly to Ethan, extending his hand to her son before even acknowledging her presence. "You must be Ethan," Daniel said, his voice warm. "I'm Daniel. That's an awesome NASA hoodie. Are you interested in space exploration?" Ethan shook his hand, clearly surprised. "Yeah, I want to be an aerospace engineer. I'm teaching myself orbital mechanics through MIT's OpenCourseWare." "No kidding? I actually worked on a project for a satellite manufacturing facility last year. The weight distribution calculations were insane." Daniel pulled out his phone. "Want to see some of the designs?" "Yes," Ethan said emphatically, leaning forward. Rachel stood there, momentarily forgotten, watching her 12-year-old son light up in conversation with a man who just treated him like a person first and a disability second. Daniel finally looked at Rachel, and his smile was genuine but apologetic. "I'm sorry, that was rude. Hi, Rachel. Would you both like to sit down?" "Both?" Rachel repeated, the word catching in her throat. "Of course, both. I asked the hostess to upgrade us to a larger table when you texted that you were bringing someone." He gestured to a spacious corner table. "I figured it might be your son based on our conversations. You mention him constantly, always a good sign in a parent." They settled at the table, Daniel making sure there was plenty of room for Ethan's wheelchair without making a production of it. He simply accommodated, naturally, as if this was completely normal. "So," Daniel said, looking between them, "I have a confession to make. I was incredibly nervous about tonight. Not because of you," he added quickly to Rachel, "but because I really wanted to make a good impression, and I'm not always great at first dates. My sister says I talk too much about buildings." "I like buildings," Ethan offered. "Mom says I have an engineer's brain. I notice structural details most people miss." "Really? Okay. Test time." Daniel pointed at the restaurant's ceiling. "What do you notice about the support beams?" Ethan studied the ceiling carefully. "They're decorative but also functional. The wood grain patterns match, which means they're probably real wood, not synthetic. And they're positioned to handle the weight of the second floor. But the spacing is wider than standard because..." He paused, calculating. "Because there's probably steel reinforcement inside." Daniel grinned. "Exactly right. This building was renovated 5 years ago. They kept the original beams for aesthetic purposes, but added internal steel supports to meet modern code. You have a seriously good eye." "Ethan designs buildings in Minecraft," Rachel said, finding her voice. "Cities, actually, complete with functional transportation systems." "That's incredible. Have you thought about architecture school?" "I've thought about it," Ethan said carefully, "but I worry about accessibility. A lot of architecture programs require site visits, climbing around construction zones, things that might be difficult in a wheelchair." Daniel's expression grew serious. "That's a legitimate concern, and honestly, the architecture field needs to do better about accessibility, both for practitioners and in design. But Ethan, some of the most innovative architects I know have disabilities. They bring perspectives the rest of us miss. They design spaces that work for everyone, not just able-bodied people." "Really?" Hope flickered across Ethan's face. "Really. In fact, There's an architect named Chris Downey who lost his sight and now specializes in designing for sensory experiences. He's brilliant. His work has changed how we think about space. Daniel pulled out his phone again. I can send you some links if you're interested. I'm very interested. The waiter arrived, and Rachel watched another small moment unfold. The waiter directed all his questions at Daniel and Rachel, essentially ignoring Ethan. And for the young man? The waiter asked, looking at Rachel. You can ask me directly, Ethan said pleasantly but firmly. I'm sitting right here, and I can speak. The waiter flushed. Of course. I apologize. What would you like? After they'd ordered, Daniel leaned back in his chair. Ethan, can I ask you something? And please tell me if I'm out of line. Okay. How long have you been using a wheelchair? 2 years, 3 months, and approximately 18 days. Diving accident. Damaged my spinal cord at T12. I have some sensation in my legs but no motor control. I also have autism, which I was diagnosed with at age 3, but that's completely unrelated to the wheelchair. People sometimes confuse the two. Rachel held her breath, waiting for Daniel's reaction. Thank you for trusting me with that information, Daniel said simply. My nephew has cerebral palsy. He uses a walker and has limited hand mobility. One of the things he talks about is how exhausting it is to constantly educate people about his disability. So I appreciate you being willing to share, and I want you to know you don't have to explain anything to me unless you want to. Ethan blinked several times, his processing expression. Your nephew. What's his name? Jamie. He's 7. Obsessed with dinosaurs and very particular about how his sandwiches are cut. Only diagonal, never straight across. I'm particular about food textures, Ethan said. It's an autism thing. I don't like mushy foods or things that are too chewy. People think I'm being difficult, but my brain literally processes those textures as unpleasant in a way that's hard to explain. That makes complete sense, Daniel said. Jamie won't eat anything green. Not because of taste, because of the color. His brain has decided green equals danger. We're working on it with his therapist, but for now we just accommodate it. Accommodation is better than forced compliance, Ethan said, and Rachel recognized the phrase from his therapist. Absolutely, Daniel agreed. Their food arrived, and the conversation flowed easily. Daniel asked Ethan about his online classes, his favorite subjects, his Minecraft cities. He asked Rachel about her work, but more importantly, he asked how she balanced being a CEO with being a single parent. I don't balance it, Rachel admitted. I juggle it. Some days I drop balls. Some days I feel like I'm failing at both jobs. But Ethan's my priority, so when I have to choose, I choose him. That's not failure, Daniel said gently. That's love. Rachel felt tears threatening and blinked them back. When was the last time someone had validated her choices instead of questioning them? Mom cries when people are nice, Ethan observed. It's because most people aren't nice, so it surprises her nervous system. Ethan, Rachel said, mortified. It's true, though. Remember when my teacher said I couldn't participate in the science fair because they didn't want to deal with wheelchair accommodations? You cried in the car afterward. Then you called the principal and made them change the policy. You did what? Daniel asked. I may have threatened legal action, Rachel admitted. The science fair is supposed to be for all students. Making it inaccessible was discrimination. Did Ethan get to participate? I won second place, Ethan said proudly. My project was on accessible design in space stations. The judges said it was surprisingly mature for a 5th grader. I'm not surprised at all, Daniel said. You're clearly brilliant. Ethan's cheeks flushed with pleasure. Compliments always affected him deeply, probably because he'd endured so many backhanded ones. Wow, you're so brave just for existing. It's inspiring how you cope, as if his life was a tragedy to be overcome rather than simply different. But Daniel hadn't said anything like that. He just acknowledged Ethan's intelligence, No qualifiers attached. As dinner wound down, Rachel expected Daniel to make polite excuses. This was usually when dates ended, when men realized that Rachel came with complications they weren't prepared to handle. Instead, Daniel said, "There's a dessert place 2 blocks from here that makes the best Korean shaved ice. Would you both be interested? Fair warning, it'll be cold, but it's worth it." "Both," Rachel said again, testing the word. "Both," Daniel confirmed, meeting her eyes. "Rachel, I don't know what you've experienced with other men, but I want to be clear. If you're interested in seeing me again, it's a package deal. You and Ethan. I'm not interested in dating someone who would separate themselves from their child to make me comfortable." Rachel's vision blurred with tears. She couldn't stop this time. Ethan, who didn't always read emotional cues, read this one perfectly. "Mom's crying again. That means you said something really right." Daniel reached across the table and gently took Rachel's hand. "I'm sorry if other people made you feel like you had to choose. You shouldn't have to." "Why are you being so understanding?" Rachel asked, her voice breaking. "You barely know us." "Because I've watched my sister navigate the world with Jamie. I've seen how people treat them. The stares, the unwanted pity, the discrimination disguised as concern. I've watched her go on dates with men who said they were fine with Jamie, but then suggested she get a full-time nurse so she'd have more freedom. As if her son was a burden to be managed instead of a person to be loved." He paused, his thumb brushing across Rachel's knuckles. "So when you walked in here with Ethan, I didn't see a test or a complication. I saw a mother brave enough to demand what she deserves, and a kid who clearly inherited her strength." "I like you," Ethan announced. "You're weird in a good way. You treat me like a regular person who happens to use a wheelchair, instead of a wheelchair who happens to have a person attached." Daniel laughed. "That might be the best compliment I've ever received." They walked and rolled to the dessert place through rain that had softened to a mist. Daniel grabbed the umbrella from Rachel without asking and held it over Ethan, getting himself wet in the process. It was such a small thing, but Rachel noticed. She always noticed the small things. The dessert cafe was cramped, and Rachel's heart sank when she saw the narrow aisles. But Daniel spoke to the manager, and within minutes, they'd rearranged a few tables to create space. "You didn't have to do that," Rachel said. "Yes, I did. Accessibility isn't a favor. It's basic human decency." While they waited for their order, Ethan pulled out his phone. "Can I show you my Minecraft city? I know it's kind of childish." "It's not childish," Daniel interrupted. "Design is design regardless of medium. Please show me." For the next 20 minutes, Ethan walked Daniel through his virtual city, explaining the transit systems, the zoning decisions, the accessibility features he'd built in. Daniel asked technical questions, offered suggestions, and genuinely engaged with Ethan's work. Rachel watched them, this man and her son, hunched over a phone screen discussing load-bearing structures in a video game, and felt something she'd thought was dead finally flicker back to life. Hope. When they finally left the cafe, it was late. Ethan had school the next day, and Rachel had an early meeting. In the parking lot, Daniel crouched down to Ethan's eye level. "Thank you for sharing your city with me tonight, and thank you for giving me a chance. I know having a stranger crash your evening wasn't ideal." "It was actually very ideal," Ethan said formally. "You're interesting, and you don't talk to me like I'm stupid or inspirational. You just talk to me. I appreciate that. You're easy to talk to. I hope we can do this again." "We can," Ethan said decisively, then looked at his mother. "Right, Mom?" Rachel met Daniel's eyes, searching for any hint of obligation or pity. She found neither. "I'd like that," she said softly. "Saturday?" Daniel asked. "There's an architecture exhibit at the museum. Ethan, I think you'd love it. They have a whole section on space station design." "Yes," Ethan said immediately. "Then it's a date." "Well, 3 dates. A family date." Daniel looked uncertain for the first time that evening. "A family date," Rachel confirmed. After Daniel had said goodbye and driven away, Rachel loaded Ethan back into the car. The rain had stopped completely now, and stars were beginning to emerge. "Mom," Ethan said quietly, "I think you should marry him." Rachel laughed, startled. "Ethan, we just met him." "I know, but he didn't flinch. Not once. When I explained my autism, when I corrected the waiter, when I talked about my accident, he didn't flinch. Most people flinch." Rachel thought about all the men who'd flinched over the years, who'd suggested Ethan stay with a sitter next time, who'd asked when Ethan would be more independent, who'd made it clear that Rachel's devotion to her son was admirable but ultimately inconvenient. "You're right," Rachel said. "He didn't flinch. So marry him. Let's start with a second date and see how it goes." "Logical," Ethan agreed. Then, "Mom, thank you for bringing me tonight. Thank you for not hiding me." Rachel's tears returned, silent and overwhelming. "Oh, baby, I should never have hidden you. You're not something to be ashamed of. You're the best part of my life." "I know that," Ethan said matter-of-factly. "But I think you forgot for a while. I think you thought you had to choose between being my mom and being a person who dates. Tonight proved you don't." From the mouths of 12-year-olds. Saturday arrived with perfect weather. Sunny but not too warm. Rachel dressed carefully, trying not to overthink it. Ethan had chosen his outfit 3 days in advance. Black jeans, a button-up shirt with tiny constellations, and his favorite sneakers with LED lights that he claimed were ironic but also awesome. Daniel picked them up in a van that immediately explained his comfort with wheelchair accessibility. "Is this?" Rachel started. "Jamie's van," Daniel confirmed. "My sister lets me borrow it when needed. It has a ramp and tie-downs. Seemed easier than trying to navigate your car." The casual thoughtfulness of it struck Rachel hard. He'd planned for Ethan's needs without making it into a production. The museum was crowded but manageable. Daniel had clearly scouted it beforehand. He knew exactly which exhibits had good wheelchair access and which hallways to avoid during peak traffic. The space station exhibit was extensive, showing the evolution of orbital habitat design from Skylab to the International Space Station to proposed Mars missions. Ethan was in heaven, reading every placard, studying every model. "They got the solar panel configuration wrong on this one," Ethan observed, pointing at a Mars habitat model. "The angle doesn't optimize for Martian solar exposure. You'd want a steeper tilt to account for the axial tilt difference." A museum docent overheard and came over. "You know about Martian solar engineering?" "I've done some research," Ethan said modestly, which Rachel knew meant he'd probably read several hundred pages of technical documentation. The docent, an older man with kind eyes, spent the next 30 minutes in deep conversation with Ethan about orbital mechanics, radiation shielding, and life support systems. Daniel and Rachel hung back, watching. "He's incredible," Daniel said quietly. "He is. Sometimes I worry that I'm not enough, that he needs more than I can give him. Special schools, specialized tutors, opportunities one can't provide." "Rachel, look at him. He's teaching a museum docent about Mars habitats. You're doing everything right. I just wish the world made it easier for him." "Me too. But until it does, he has you fighting for him. That matters more than you know." When they broke for lunch at the museum cafe, Ethan was still buzzing with excitement. "Did you see the closed-loop water recycling system model? It's based on the ISS design, but they've improved the efficiency by 18%. That's huge for long-duration missions." "I did see that," Daniel said, pulling out his phone. "Actually, I wanted to show you something. Remember I mentioned working on a satellite facility?" "Yeah. The company I worked with is launching a youth design competition next month. They want students to submit concepts for next-generation satellite components. First prize is a scholarship and a mentorship with their engineering team." Ethan's eyes went wide. "Really? Really? I have the entry details. The competition is open to students through age 15. and it's all done virtually, so accessibility isn't an issue. Daniel hesitated. Would you be interested? Would I be? Yes. Yes, absolutely. The deadline is 8 weeks out, so there's time to develop something solid. Daniel pulled up the website. They're specifically looking for innovative approaches to power management, structural design, or communication systems. Ethan was already scrolling, his mind clearly racing. Rachel watched him, then looked at Daniel. You researched this, she said. You knew about this competition before today. Daniel had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I might have checked if there were any opportunities that would interest him. Is that weird? That's probably weird. It's not weird, Rachel said, her voice thick. It's the kindest thing anyone's done for him in years. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of exhibits, Ethan's constant questions, and easy conversation. Daniel seemed genuinely content to spend hours in a museum catering to a 12-year-old's interests, never checking his phone or showing signs of boredom. When they stopped for ice cream on the way home, Ethan made an announcement. I've decided you can keep dating, he told Daniel seriously. You passed all my tests. I didn't know I was being tested, Daniel said, amused. Everyone gets tested. Most people fail. You didn't talk down to me, you didn't ignore me to focus on Mom, you didn't treat my wheelchair like it's the most interesting thing about me, and you actually listened when I explained orbital mechanics instead of just pretending to care. I wasn't pretending. I know. That's why you passed. Over the next 3 months, Daniel became a regular presence in their lives. He came to Ethan's online coding class presentations. He helped Rachel debug a crisis at work when her CTO had a family emergency. He joined them for movie nights, learning that Ethan needed the volume kept low and the lights dimmed but not completely off. He met Rachel's sister, who pulled Rachel aside and whispered, "Where did you find him? And are there more?" He brought Jamie to meet Ethan, and the two boys bonded immediately over their shared experiences with accessibility challenges and well-meaning but clueless adults. People always want to pray for me, Jamie told Ethan matter-of-factly. I tell them to pray for better sidewalk curb cuts instead. That would actually help. Same, Ethan agreed. I had someone tell me I was blessed despite my challenges. I told her I'm just regular blessed, and the challenges are because buildings have too many stairs. The two boys became genuine friends, texting about video games and school and the various indignities of being disabled in an able-bodied world. And slowly, carefully, Rachel let herself fall in love. It wasn't dramatic or sweeping. It was Daniel remembering that Rachel hated cilantro and always ordered accordingly. It was the way he listened to Ethan's long explanations about programming concepts without ever seeming impatient. It was how he'd learned to fold Ethan's wheelchair properly and where Rachel kept the medical supplies. It was ordinary moments that felt extraordinary because they'd been so rare in Rachel's life. 6 months after that first dinner, Daniel asked Rachel and Ethan to come to his apartment for dinner. He was cooking Korean food, he said, his mother's recipes. When they arrived, the table was set for 4. Is your sister coming? Rachel asked. Not exactly. Daniel looked nervous, which was unusual for him. I wanted to talk to both of you about something, and I wanted to do it properly. He pulled out a chair for Rachel, then turned to face Ethan. Ethan, I need to ask your permission for something. Ethan sat up straighter, attentive. I love your mom. I love you. These past 6 months have been the best of my life, and I don't want them to end. But before I can move forward, I need to know how you feel about that. Move forward how? Ethan asked, though Rachel suspected he knew exactly where this was going. I want to ask your mom to marry me, but I won't do that without your blessing. You were here first. Your relationship with her is the most important one in her life, and I respect that. So I'm asking you, would you be okay with me becoming part of your family? Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his face serious. Rachel held her breath. Do I have to call you Dad? Ethan asked finally. No. You can call me whatever you're comfortable with. Daniel is fine. Or we can figure out something else together. Okay, because I had a dad. He died before the accident. I don't really remember him, but Mom does, and I don't want to erase him. I would never want that either, Daniel said gently. Your dad was important. He gave the world you, and that's a pretty incredible legacy. Ethan nodded, processing. If you marry Mom, where would we live? That's something we'd all discuss together. Maybe here, maybe your place, maybe somewhere new. Whatever works best for our family. Our family, Ethan repeated, testing the phrase. He looked at his mother, then back at Daniel. Yes, 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 you can marry Mom. But I have conditions. Daniel smiled. Name them. 1, we still have movie nights every Friday. 2, you have to help me with the satellite competition if I get stuck. 3, you can't try to be my dad, but you have to be my friend. 4, if anyone is ever mean to me about my autism or my wheelchair, you have to take my side, even if they're your family. And 5, Ethan paused. 5, you have to make Mom happy. Really happy. Not fake happy. I can absolutely agree to all of those conditions, Daniel said, his voice rough with emotion. Thank you, Ethan. Thank you for trusting me. Then Daniel turned to Rachel, pulling a small box from his pocket. Rachel Morrison, you're the strongest person I've ever met. You're brilliant and compassionate, and you've raised an incredible kid while running a company and fighting for accessibility and somehow still finding time to be kind to everyone around you. I don't want to make your life easier by taking Ethan out of the equation. I want to make it better by being part of your team. He opened the box, revealing a simple platinum band with 3 small stones. That's us, Rachel whispered, seeing it. 3 stones. 3 stones, Daniel confirmed. Because this isn't just about you and me. It's about the family we're building together. Will you marry me? Yes, Rachel said, tears streaming down her face. Yes, absolutely yes. Ethan cheered, and Daniel slipped the ring on Rachel's finger before pulling both of them into a hug. Group hug is acceptable, Ethan said, though he was clearly pleased. But only for 30 seconds. Then it becomes uncomfortable. They laughed, and Daniel set his timer for exactly 30 seconds. The wedding was small, held in a botanical garden that Rachel had scouted personally for accessibility. Every path was wheelchair-friendly, every restroom had proper space, every detail considered. Ethan walked Rachel down the aisle, technically rolled, but the sentiment was the same. He'd insisted on wearing a suit that matched Daniel's, and he took his role seriously. Do you, Daniel Park, promise to honor Ethan's 5 conditions? The officiant asked, going off script per their request. I do, Daniel said solemnly, looking at Ethan. Do you, Rachel Morrison, promise to let Daniel help without feeling like you have to do everything alone? I do, Rachel said, recognizing that this vow was meant for her specifically. Do you, Ethan Morrison, promise to give this new family configuration a chance, even when it's weird or uncomfortable? Ethan considered this. I promise to try. That's all I can guarantee. That's all any of us can do, the officiant said with a smile. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promises about communication and accessibility and loving each other's families as their own. Jamie was there with Daniel's sister, both of them crying happy tears. At the reception, Ethan gave a speech that he'd written and memorized. When Mom first brought me to meet Daniel, I thought it was weird. Why would she test a date by bringing her disabled autistic kid? But then I realized it wasn't a test. It was a statement. She was saying, this is my life, and if you can't handle all of it, you can't have any of it. And Daniel said, I want all of it. He paused, looking at Daniel. You didn't just accept me. You didn't just tolerate me. You actually like me, which is different. You ask about my interests and remember what I tell you and help me with my projects. You're not trying to be my dad, but you're definitely my family. His voice wavered slightly. My first dad died before I got to know him. My second dad chose me. I think that's pretty cool. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. 3 years later, the house they'd bought together was custom designed by Daniel specifically for accessibility. Wide doorways, a roll-in shower, lowered countertops in Ethan's bathroom, and a tech room where Ethan could work on his projects. Ethan was 15 now, taller but still using his wheelchair. He'd won the satellite design competition and 2 subsequent competitions after that. He was being recruited by top engineering schools, with full scholarships and promises of accessible accommodations. MIT called again. Ethan announced at dinner one evening, "They want to fly me out for a campus visit." "That's incredible," Rachel said, trying to hide the panic at the thought of her son 3,000 miles away. "It's scary," Ethan corrected, reading her perfectly. "For both of us, but also exciting." "You don't have to decide anything yet," Daniel said. "You've got time." "I know, but I've been thinking, maybe I do want MIT. Their accessibility services are excellent, and their aerospace program is literally the best in the world. Plus, their lab has this amazing adaptive equipment." "Then we'll make it work," Rachel said firmly. "Whatever you need." Jamie, now 10 and a regular fixture in their home, piped up, "Can I have Ethan's room when he leaves?" "You have your own room here," Daniel's sister pointed out. She and Jamie had moved in 6 months ago, after her divorce had left her struggling financially. The house had plenty of space, and it just made sense. "But Ethan's room has the cool lights," Jamie protested. "We'll get you cool lights," Daniel promised. Later that night, after everyone was asleep, Rachel found Daniel in his home office, working on designs. "What are you working on?" "A new project. Pro bono. It's a community center for the disability advocacy group Ethan volunteers with. They want something fully accessible, obviously, but also beautiful. A space that celebrates disability rather than just accommodating it." Rachel looked at the designs, at the wide spaces and varied seating options and sensory-friendly elements. "Ethan's going to leave," she said quietly. "I know. I'm not ready. I know that too." Daniel pulled her close. "But we raised him to be independent. We can't be surprised when he actually becomes independent. He's my baby. He'll always be your baby. He'll just be your baby with a degree in aerospace engineering, changing the world." Rachel laughed through her tears. "When did you become so wise?" "Probably around the same time I met a woman brave enough to bring her son on a first date." They sat in comfortable silence, Rachel leaning against her husband, thinking about the terrified woman she'd been 3 years ago. That woman had been so afraid of rejection, so tired of fighting, so convinced she'd have to choose between love and her son. She'd never imagined finding both. "Do you ever regret it?" Rachel asked. "Taking on me and Ethan and all the complexity that comes with us?" Daniel turned to look at her fully. "Rachel, you and Ethan didn't complicate my life. You completed it. Before you, I was going through motions. Nice apartment, successful career, regular visits with Jamie. But I wasn't building anything meaningful. Now I wake up every day as part of something bigger than myself. Even when Ethan has bad days, when his pain levels spike,